Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. That's Ari. I'm Korea. I've been waiting for. Here it is, the moment all you baseball fans have been waiting for. This is our official 2024 MLB season preview. Now, what we're going to do in this video, obviously, we're going to be breaking down some of our win totals that we've seen, all 30 MLB teams targeting some win totals that we like in terms of the over or the under. We're going to be talking about potential division winners, World Series winners, season award winners like Cy Young, MVP, and all that stuff. And then we're going to be wrapping it up with some season squares on prize picks, a couple that we like to maybe build a season entry that we may or may not even be building as we get closer to the beginning of this. So for all you college basketball fans out there, we will be back tomorrow, obviously, for another college basketball day of bets. And we may or may not have a card out later, just depending on what we like, because obviously we know college basketball today. But we did want to make sure, obviously, we go into the sport that's going to be following college basketball for a majority of us with baseball, kind of just giving a full preview with about the season starting in exactly 1 week for the Dodgers and Padres in Seoul, South Korea, and for the rest of the MLB starting near the end of the month. But here, now we're just going to get into some of the win totals first that we liked. Here are mine, and here are my three. And you see these three teams, and you kind of are like three random teams, Korea. Why are you only targeting these three? Let me explain here. First, we're going to go to the Diamondbacks, and I love their over 83.5. I will take it all the way up to 84. I think this is an 85 plus win team. When we look at the Diamondbacks from last year, right, they have pretty much a similar team. They got the pieces they needed. They brought in the third baseman via trade that, yeah, they brought in a third baseman, obviously, Eugenio Suarez, hard hitting third baseman. We know, obviously, as Mariner fans know how big and important he's been to that organization. In terms of some of the key hits he's had, and his consistent WRC, and now he brings that hard hitting power to Arizona, which is pretty much the perfect fit that they needed for that third base. They also needed some more pop in their lineup, and they brought in Jock Peterson, another, even though it's a 1 year deal, just another big name, who has that ability to hit the ball really hard. And the one big thing was, okay, offensively they did the two things they needed. They targeted the third base position, which was going to be one, and then they targeted the offensive pop, which was kind of lacking for a long time. So that was two. What was the third thing they needed? Oh yeah, some good starting pitching, and they got K-Rod, I don't know why I was saying that, and Water Runs, and he had a pretty good year in Detroit. Obviously, he had, I think, about a 3 ERA, but at the same time, with Detroit, it's hard to really low ERA considering, the bullpen was always key last year. But in terms of his, innings eating, Erod was that guy. Erod innings for Detroit. There was rumors of him going to LA, and, a big spot for him, but he didn't want to go to LA. So he chose to go to the Diamondbacks. And, I feel like that kind of perfectly fits well with the rotation they have. Zach Allen, obviously, he's going to have a little bit of regression, but I'm not expecting, a whole lot of regression to where he's one of the worst pitchers in baseball, like Alek Manoah. You still have Merrill Kelly. They still have Burt, who I believe is going to be taking it up next year. And then in the back, you bring in Erod, and then you have either Ryan Nelson or Tommy Henry or whoever, right? And I feel like that's already a big step in the right for this team. And then obviously back in with their bullpen, Paul Sewald, the guy who's been kind of the reason as to why they went on that one of the World Series runs was because of him. And obviously, in those clutch moments, being able to get the save and was one thing the Diamondbacks were kind of lacking, at the halfway point of the season last year, a consistent, closer who could really, get them those one-run games. And, I swear the Diamondbacks and the Mariners just love trading with each other because we send them all. It's funny, but yeah, I'm taking this Diamondbacks over 83.5. I love this team this year. I think they're going to be second place in a pretty not wide open for second, but I'd say in terms of second place right now, I'd say the Diamondbacks have a little bit of coming off of that World Series run. The Padres, we look at the Padres right now, and they are a team going in the wrong direction. I feel, they lost Juan Soto. There was Blake Snell, depending on where he goes, but we know signing with the Padres, and they're in a confusing state. I feel like the Giants are just a mediocre team. They have addressed, some needs, but they haven't addressed all the needs yet. And brought in Chapman and obviously brought in Jung Ho Lee, but is that really going to make a difference? The Rockies are just an abysmal franchise. So I feel like second place is kind of the taking for the grabs for this Diamondbacks team. And I feel like 83.5 is a great line for their win total. I like taking that over. I would put out maybe 2 to 3 units. I think the Diamondbacks team is going to be one of the better teams in the NL this year, especially with what they've done this offseason to pretty much set themselves up in a great position to be a considerably better team than last year. And they were already a great team last year. So I'm taking the Diamondbacks over 83.5 win year. I'm playing 2 to 3 units. I love this Diamondbacks team this year with all the additions they made this offseason and continuing through last season. Oh, and did we mention they have an MVP candidate named Corbin Carroll, gentlemen? Exactly. They also have Ketel Martillo, Geraldo Perdomo, Christian Walker, all those big guys who they depended on, to really get those key hits last year in the whether it's the Dodgers or the Phillies or whoever they played. It was definitely, a coming out of the Arizona Diamondbacks. So taking the over 83.5, I love this win total for them. I think it's kind of low. Just considering the fact that, they got a lot better than what their record, honestly, right now is going to be about 85 win team. So I'm taking that over 83.5. And then we're going to go to the under, and I am fading the Miami Winds. And I know is really exciting, but we got to fade them here. We're taking the under 78.5. Why? The Miami Marlins, right? They've lost a lot in terms of the talent that is going to be there this year. They don't have Alcantara because he's going TJ surgery. For those who don't know, that's basically the ACL of football. Your season's over. So they lose their ace, right? And they have to depend on guys like Jesus Luzardo, Yuri Perez to step up. Also Braxton Garrett. We've seen some flash as well. And I can't really trust this Miami Marlins rotation, especially their bullpen that didn't really. And that was the one thing as to reason why I'm fading this Miami Marlins team is because they haven't done much anything in this offseason. The losses, they lost Jorge Soler. One of their key reasons as to why they had a consistent lineup was because Luis Arias, obviously the one guy that, is the key piece for the Marlins team in terms of how consistent he is at the plate. But then when you look out, right, you had what's his name? De La Cruz. Yeah, Brian De La Cruz, who offensively was decent, but then out in the field, yikes. They had Jazz Chisholm injured. They have for Jake Berger, and they're pretty thin in terms of depth. When you look at this Miami Marlins team and how this team was a play, obviously they pretty much got swept by the Phillies, but we hope the Phillies were going to beat them because it's the Phillies in October. It's hard to beat anyone. It's hard to beat the Phillies in October. But with this Miami Marlins team, we look and we see what have they done this offseason? They haven't done anything. It looks like the whole organization is going in a new direction. They fired, I believe, their GM Kim Ning, I don't know how to pronounce it, gone. Obviously, their hitting coach, he's gone. I wonder where he is. Wink, wink. And those are two big things. Obviously, especially for the hitting, because the Miami, obviously were one of the more consistent lineups in terms of top to bottom, in that NL East with their bats, and that was kind of the one thing they were dependent because of the fact that their bullpen was pretty shaky. And when we look at them in those run games, that's kind of the big reason as to why I'm targeting their under. They were one of the best teams in one-run games this year. I am not backing that. So you have a Miami Marlins team that their ace that lost one of their best bats that has to depend on prospects, guys that they have right now on their team to get over 80 wins in a stacked, well, I wouldn't say stacked, but obviously a pretty top-heavy NL East division where it's going to be the Braves and Phillies competing, obviously, and then who knows whatever the hell the Mets are going to do this year. I wouldn't be surprised if the Miami Marlins finish near the last. Not be surprised. That's my bold statement. I think the Miami Marlins may even finish last place this year. I just don't really see any positive going for them this year. Obviously they're just kind of waiting to next year with Sandy Alcantara and I whatever they do at the deadline in terms of trading away their star guys or potential assets. I just don't see. So I'm taking the Marlins under 78 and a half. I would put 3 units on that. I'm just fading this team because of the fact that they've lost much and they haven't done pretty much anything to make up for it this season. So I'm taking the Marlins under 878 and a half. And you see the one in the middle. And you're like, oh, but they don't have Shohei. Why are you taking the over? Let me explain. Low for a reason. Adjusted this total for the Angels because Shohei leaving. Right? It's super low. You got 70 wins. The Angels, they barely got that with Shohei last year. Now, this one, obviously, the one I'm sweating the most because the big key factor that we have to do is the health of Mike Trout. And it is going to be, and also just where Angels view Mike Trout. Because, there have been rumors of him being traded, this offseason, and maybe if the Angels start out really bad and, it's another down year for the Angels, they may pull the trigger with Mike Trout. So that's kind of all we're depending on. But I feel like with the loss of Ohtani, I feel like the books have already pushed that line so far down anyways. And, obviously Ohtani is a huge loss, right? How he played, he was the best player in baseball for so long. And now he's going pretty much across the bridge to the Dodgers. And, when you look at this Angels team, they haven't really brought in too many big names. They brought in a good setup piece. But when you look at the holistic piece for the holistic team for the Los Angeles Angels, right? They have Ohapi, right? They have the future, right? They're gonna have this hopefully coming back, the hard throwing righty. I know they love Mickey Moniak down there. Obviously Mike Trout, big name. I've heard they've been linked to Blake Snell. So if they do get Blake Snell, that could be big for that win total. But I feel like with this win total being super low for a reason, I feel like the Angels will pull this over. I'm not putting too much on it. I probably put maybe 1.5 units on it. I'm just not too confident in the Angels. I'm more confident on this win total being so low by the books that the Angels somehow finish over. But it all kind of depends on how the Angels do because, we always say that the Angels are good. We've been saying that, or the Angels are this close away from a playoff spot or this close or whatnot. And they always come up short, and injuries are always a big reason as to why they've been playing so well. And, it's tough, but when you look at this Angels team right now and, there's not really much optimism coming from them. Well, obviously Shohei Ohtani, but when you still have one of the best center fielders in Mike, you still have, a pretty, dominant, infield per se with, Mr. I don't want to play baseball, Anthony Rendon, who's don't get me started with that clown. But but honestly, I do think the Angels win total is pretty low here. So I am taking that over 71.5. I'm just putting probably 1.5. I'm going to finalize these units, as we get closer to the season, probably throughout this weekend. But I will say the Marlins is going to be my biggest one. That is a 3 play right there for me. I'm really, really confident in this Miami Marlins team. Just absolutely shitty this year. I think it's going to be a really down year for this Miami Marlins team, whether it's their production at the plate going down, whether it's the bullpen not being the same as last year, the starting rotation taking a little bit of regression, whatnot. Those are my 3 favorite win totals specifically. I'm taking the Marlins team total under 78.5 wins, and then I'm really confident also the Diamondbacks over 83.5 wins, and then for my third team, I do like the Angels over 71.5. I like it, but not as my other 2. So just take that as you will. Those are my 3 favorite win totals throughout the season. I'm targeting the Marlins the most, and then also the Diamondbacks, and then the Angels over 71.5. If that goes up or down, that may depend on how I target the Angels as well. But I believe I know I already placed for the Marlins under 78.5, and I'm going to take a look at the Diamondbacks. Those are my 3. Ari, I know I've been yapping for about 15 minutes now. Do you have any? In fact, What do you like in terms of the win totals this year throughout the league if you're targeting specifically? Sorry, I think you're muted.
I'm on 2 win totals. We'll start off with the Mariners. I got them at plus 100, which is mostly what led me to taking them because of that value. Because most of the win totals are like minus 120, favored. This one's plus 100, 87.5. They won 88 last year, and that was after a super super slow start early in the first couple months of the season. They got hot, late in the year that helped push them over this win total, but still just missed out on the playoffs by 1 game, in the division by 2 games. This offseason, they are bringing back pretty much the same starting rotation. Obviously, the bullpens, they brought in Gregory Santos from the White Sox, who's going to open the season on the IL, but hopefully he won't miss too much time. And then they signed Ryan Stanek in free agency I assume, because I know he's going to miss the start of the season. Santos. Lineup wise, obviously you still have Julio, who I'll get into later in another topic. You upgrade second base with Torrey Polanco. Third base is probably the biggest question mark right now with Rojas and Luis Urias. You bring in Luke Raley. You still have Cal behind the plate. Hopefully Ty France is going to bounce back, which would be it would be like an addition in a way because of how poor the season he had last year. Obviously you lose some guys. You lose Kalanick, Teoscar, like you said, Eugenio Suarez, but I think that and then you also bring back Mitch Haniger. I think the big focal point of this offseason was cutting down strikeouts, and that's partially why they moved on from Suarez, Teoscar, and Kalanick. And they're still going to have some kind of like league average guys strikeout wise, but I think they finished last year with like 3 guys in the top 10, I believe, in total strikeouts in the AL. And so that's not going to be the case again this year. So obviously that will help with, runners on base and everything. Obviously it's a tough division, and that's why I'm fading the next team that I'm going to talk about after this. But I just think the Mariners, I think it's going to be a big part of how they start. It's going to be where they finish. They can't rely on the extreme success that they had late last year. Again, like, it's not sustainable with how good they were late last season to, overcome another poor, slow start. So hopefully they can get off to, a fast start, unlike what they've done in recent seasons, the past couple of seasons, and, help. Obviously that would be a huge help for this to go over, is to get off to a fast start and not have to keep kind of playing from behind, so to speak. Second half of the season to try to fight this win total and, fight to try to get into the playoffs or even win the division and try to, find yourself like 8 games back by July of the division and have to, scrap your way back up to the top. So that's my first one. And then the second win total is fading the Red Sox, and it mostly has to do with just them being in the toughest division in baseball. There's already been talks of them potentially trading Kenley Jansen, which could happen like by the deadline. They signed Giolito this offseason, and he's already out for the season, so that puts the rotation kind of already like wasn't great, and now it's arguably even worse. I mean, I think probably have Bayo starting opening day, and then you have guys like Pivetta, Crawford, Whitlock, Houck, a bunch of guys who could be decent, but no one that is going to be a clear ace. I mean, Bayo has the upside to be that ace, you could say, but kind of overall top to bottom, you don't have that. And then the lineup's pretty good. Devers, obviously, you still have. We'll see if Story can kind of try to find his way back to his old form coming back from injury. But yeah, I mean, it's just a combination of the division the Red Sox are in the toughest division in baseball. The potential to sell at the deadline if things aren't going their way, which could obviously help this under. I mean, just last year they won 78, so they just went over under this total by 1 game. And I'm not really sure that they improved, all that much this offseason. And we saw other teams in their division improve. I mean, obviously, you have Soto going to the Yankees, Burns to the Orioles, Blue Jays still be solid. Rays are always going to be up there, in the division. So this is just a combination of the Red Sox not doing that much, and they lost, to Giolito, like I said, for the season, and then the division that they're in being, probably the toughest in baseball overall with the other 4 teams. So just kind of quick to the point there. Mariners over 87.5 at plus 100, and Red Sox under 77.5. With the possibility of them potentially selling at the deadline, already talking about trading Kenley Jansen as one player. They traded Sale as well to Atlanta, who obviously was injury prone as well, obviously. So yeah, those are my 2 win totals for this season.
Well, I'm never going to fade you with the Mariners, obviously. I love that total for you as well. You mentioned you're getting it at plus money. The Mariners, I go on and on about how, this team has improved. This be here for another hour, and I know you don't want that either. I'll talk about the Red Sox for a little bit. I do agree with you there. This team, especially in really, really competitive AL East this year, I don't really like their outlook for the Red Sox this year. You mentioned they're already talking about some of the key guys they got this offseason, like Kenley Jansen, or in previous seasons before, talking about trading some of their away. We already talked about Giolito already kind of being out for the season. He just got UCL, so he avoided TJ surgery, but obviously he's done for the season. So that's obviously a big loss there. So I feel like it's already kind of going to be a start of a down year for this Boston Red Sox team. So I definitely agree with you there on that under 77.5 wins. So those are Ari's 2 win totals, the Mariners and then the Red Sox, and I had my 3 as well. But now we're going to get into some of the division, season totals, in terms of season award, that fun stuff. So here's my one division future right now. I didn't really like the value of any of the other divisions. The only one I really like right now is the Rays to win the AL East. I got that at plus 600, and here's why. When we look at the Tampa Bay Rays, right, we see the whole Wander Franco situation. Yes, is it unfortunate and disgusting? Yes. But it looks like they have already moved because they are really, really excited, Ari, about Jose Caballero. I know. I couldn't believe it either. They're very excited about Jose Caballero hitting bombs. I was like, what? Is this the same guy that they're talking about? Jose Caballero, the guy that we saw who can barely hit T? Exactly. The Rays have this way of developing talent, right? And we've seen it. They have so much talent. We always talk about how do the Rays always get this much talent, right? And they won 90 games without most of their starting rotation, right? When we think about the Rays last year, we talk about how they have one of the better rotations. Now, yes, is one of those pieces now permanently gone? Yeah, with Glasnow, but they still have Drew Rasmussen, right? They still have Springs, right? They still have Eflin, who now looks like an 8. So he could replace Glasnow's spot. They have Savale, who, I feel like is going to have a bounce back season under his standards for Tampa Bay. Then we look at the offense, right? They don't have Rayleigh anymore, obviously, in Seattle, but they still have one of the most exciting players in Randy Arozarena. They still have a talented top to bottom lineup with Harold Ramirez. They'll have Yandy Diaz, who's one of the better basemen in terms of him, in terms of his OPS and getting on. When you look at this AL East division, right, they kind of have that sneaky value because of the fact that no one really knows what their outlook is because they don't really make any big moves, right? We know what the Yankees are going to do. Now, honestly, I don't know if you want to take the Yankees because breaking news, people, Garrett Cole's out for the first couple months. So that's a little bit of value that I would not be taking on the Yankees right now to win the AL East because maybe you want to wait until Garrett comes back, but right now I love the value at plus 600 for the Rays. I have a great shot at winning this division. We talk about the other 4 teams, and we know that it's going to be a really stacked. I say their top competition is going to be the team that won it last year, the Baltimore Orioles. But we look at the Orioles team, and did they make any big moves this offseason? Yes, but at the same time, we don't know how it's going to do in this rotation. We've seen what his talent in Milwaukee, but it's a team. You always got to adjust, new system, all that fun stuff. we expect the bats for the Orioles to still be alive with Rutschman and obviously they're going to bring in Jackson Holiday sometime. They obviously still have Gunnar Henderson and Anthony Santander and all those guys that kind of had an amazing year, Baltimore Orioles. But look at this Rays team, right? They got super, super injured with their starting rotation, and they still won 90 games, and they were a playoff team. It just really makes it hard for me to ignore that. So I'm taking the Rays plus 600. I think there's great value. I'm putting a whole unit on it. I think there's some great value here for the Rays to win the AL East. I think in terms of you look at all the other teams, the Yankees, obviously, they just lost the first couple months. I feel like they're due for some regression, maybe not first. We look at the Blue Jays, and I think they're a solid wild card team, but they're definitely not winning that division because the Yankees have owned them forever and ever. And then we talked about the Red Sox just not being a competitive baseball team this year. So that kind of just leaves one team, and the team he likes to talk about. And I like the Tampa Bay Rays here to win the AL East at plus 600. I think there's great value there for this team to win the division. Ari, if you have any division futures right now, where are you putting your money to win a division?
Yeah, just one for me in the AL Central. Another value play of the Guardians at plus 350. I mean, we're just 1 year removed from them running away with it. I think they won it by like 11 games in 2022. Last year was just a down year for them with injuries to the starting rotation. And, I mean, Jose Ramirez was still solid, but just an overall just down year for the team as a whole. I really like the starting rotation, obviously led by Shane Bieber. I'm a big fan of Tristan McKenzie too. Unfortunately, he just dealt with injury, so hopefully he can stay healthy. And then, we're looking for another step forward from guys like Gavin Williams, Logan Allen, Tanner Bybee as well, kind of in that 3, 4, 5 spots in their rotation. They have a really solid bullpen led by Clase, who I know you'll get into later as well. And then, in their starting lineup, you still have, Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor kind of in that, middle of the lineup, power hitters. You still have Jimenez. You have Bo Naylor, who I think will be starting behind the plate alongside Austin Hedges. And then you still have obviously Stephen Kwan in the outfield as well, leading off. So, I mean, obviously their lineup isn't the strongest overall, but I mean, I would say that Ramirez and Naylor in that kind of 3-4 or 2-3, wherever they line up, it's, one of the stronger kind of 1-2 punches in the MLB kind of overall. And you have a strong bullpen and a solid rotation. And again, this is just AL Central is just a crapshoot of a division kind of. I mean, obviously the White Sox are the White Sox. But then, you have the Tigers and Royals who are kind of sneaky teams, kind of a lot getting some hype. Twins are minus 115, which I don't see any value in that. I mean, they could win the division. I get that they're the favorite, but I don't think that there's value there just because of, there's 4 teams I think that could win the division. And I think the Guardians have the best value at plus 350, all things considered. Again, 1 year removed from them winning it by 11 games in 2022. Last year was a down year for them with injuries to the rotation pretty much all year. So I like this value for the Guardians at plus 350 heading into this year to win the AL Central.
I was looking at the same thing. I'm glad we were looking at the same thing right there. You look at this AL Central, always weaker divisions. In fact, you can pretty much say it's going to be the weakest division in baseball this season. And you look at all the other teams, there's not much value on the Twins, as you mentioned. They took a step back because they lost Maya Gray. So those are 2 big inning eaters that they lost. And I don't know if they can just really just make that up with, who they signed. And then you look at the Tigers and Royals, and I think they're just a couple years away from that team, especially the Tigers. I think really, really years away. And I know one guy who I'm going to get into a little bit later as kind of the main reason as to why they're maybe a couple years away. As for the Royals, they're the same way. They just don't have the talent yet. I think obviously outside Bobby Witt, the main talent Kansas City really has right now, I don't really see that much. They have Vinny Pask and, they have guys, but, we always see Kansas City as kind of a place to where, a veteran gets like a minimum and then gets traded to a World Series contending team. Aroldis Chapman. Speaking of Aroldis Chapman, oh God. But
Next topic.
Sorry, that just popped in my brain. Oh God. For those who unfortunately had to witness Aroldis Chapman's very interesting Instagram story the other night, which just was that discussion for another time. But anyways, looking at this AL Central division, I agree with you. I think the Guardians, for the value there, I think is the best choice. You look at the Tigers; they're 1 year, 2 years away. Same for the Royals. The White Sox are just a complete mess, and obviously their whole franchise is going direction. They've lost so many guys. They've traded away so many pieces. They're not really getting the prospects that they're hoping for back. So it's just a lot of dysfunction going on. The Chicago White Sox. So I like the value for the Guardians there at plus 350 to win the AL Central. You mentioned it's pretty much the same team. The one kind of big question is what this team is going to do with Shane Bieber. Obviously, there were rumors of him being traded last year, but obviously he's still in Cleveland, so he's not going anywhere for now. But I do like the value there at plus 350 for the Guardians for your division. But now we're going to get, obviously, we're just building up here. Obviously, we have our win totals, our division winners, but now we're going to get into some of our season awards in terms of, what we'd like for full season. We don't have any World Series props. Maybe Ari does. I don't really have any World Series. It's too early, very early for World Series. But if I'm team, it's going to be the Seattle Mariners. I'm just kidding. Or am I? But here are my season awards here. I'm going to pick two guys to win the AL Cy Young, and I think there's great value here. First, we're going to start with Tariq Skubal, and if you've never heard of him, this is why I'm taking him, and this is what the Detroit conversation I just had with you. At plus 1,000 is pretty good value for Tariq Skubal here, and when we look at Skubal, right, he is someone who is very, very unknown, right, in terms of his pitches, but he eats up a lot of innings for that Detroit Tigers team. He has some really good nasty stuff that he's been working on this offseason, and he throws down and away. He gets the strikeouts. He's a really, really good, low, very, very down and away catcher. And I think that's great look for this team. He's going to be leading that rotation, obviously. So it's not like he's competing, because now that Rod's out of the rotation, it's going to be Skubal kind of rotation now. And I think there's good value here. Obviously, Cy Young, I think with Garrett Cole being out for a little while, I think there's a lot more value here, because for the first 2 months of the season, we're not going to have, Garrett Cole, and everyone thought, oh, he's such a lock to win it. But I think there's definitely some value here with throughout all the top AL pitchers that we like to talk about. But I like Skubal here for the value. I think he's, going to be kind of the main reason as to why this Tigers does have success. And, I think, if all goes right for the Tigers, I think Skubal's AL Cy Young name is probably going to be mentioned just as a flyer, just because of how dominant he could be. They're, obviously Fangraphs and all their projections have different things for him, but I think he definitely can be, one of the biggest pitchers, in terms for this Tigers team that really, is starting to find their offense now, which has kind of been obviously starting to get their offense going. And then obviously the only big caveat with Detroit was their pitching, but they made some decent moves this offseason. They obviously brought in Maeda to kind of back end with Skubal. So I think but the thing with this Detroit team is I feel like, everything's got to go right for Skubal to win the Cy Young. And I think there's some value there, but, especially Cole being out for the first couple months. Now I think there's some really good value for maybe like one of these two guys has a great start, and then it's kind of a catch-up game for Garrett Cole, and he doesn't really or dominance from either one of these two guys just continues over the season. So I'm taking the ball just a little bit, maybe half a unit or something on AL Cy Young. One I'm really talking about for the value is Kirby, and I love value for AL Cy Young at plus 1,400. And here's why. And I'm going to take all the Mariners out of this explanation right now. So no Mariners buy as to why I'm George Kirby. When we talk about one of the best pitchers at not walking anybody, right? George Kirby has one of the best walk rates in baseball. In fact, the best walk rate in baseball. He doesn't walk anybody. He's a very ground ball, get out, strikeout pitcher. He doesn't walk you. He hates walking people. And I feel with this, and I know he's adding some new pitches as well. And with the dominance that we saw from George Kirby last year, there's no reason as to why to take him for this value of plus 1,400, to win the AL Cy Young, especially now with Garrett Cole out of the spotlight for now. Now, with the Mariners pitchers, I feel like it's hard because you could take any. And when I talk about the three, about Castillo, Gilbert, or Kirby, and I'm taking the value on Kirby here just because of the fact that there's so much for him. He's only going to be in year 3, or year 2 technically, but full 3. Full year 2, but technically year 3. And what he has done and grown so much as a player, we've seen. He's adding a knuckleball. We saw a little bit of it last year. I think it was on the last game of the season. For Mariner fans, we saw him throw a knuckleball that was absolutely filthy. And, we've seen some absolute gems from George Kirby. We obviously talk about, his game 3 in the ALDS where, he struck out Jose Altuve and he had the arms pump going to the dugout. That was an amazing scene for obviously all Mariner fans, and just, George Kirby, kind of solidifying himself as one of the best pitchers. Obviously still, when we were still kind of, concerned, we didn't really know Kirby we were going to get out of his first year as a Seattle Mariner. So that was great to see him kind of just burst onto the scene. And, I feel like there's just so much great value for him at plus 1,400 right now. He's one of the more consistent, obviously a little bit of it just in terms of the ERA, but I feel like that's obviously just because of the baseball game has changed in terms of everything. Obviously ERA is kind of influenced almost everyone, but in terms of the Mariners team ERA always finishes in the top 5. Kirby, one of the more consistent pitchers. He doesn't walk anybody, gonna get his Ks. And I think, there's some great plus 1,400 for George Kirby to win the Cy Young. So those are my 2 picks for season awards. I'm just taking Tariq Skubal and George Kirby to potentially win the Cy Young. I feel like for Detroit, obviously, it's more of a everything kind of has to go right. But for George Kirby, if he has that dollar that a lot of people have been, projecting him, I feel like there's a great opportunity for him to win the AL Cy Young at 1,500, and I'm definitely going to put some value on it. So those are my 2 season awards right now and then in terms of MVPs, and all that other stuff, there's so much, but especially for the AL MVP, because, right now it's a wide open race with no Shohei Ohtani anymore. And I know you're probably going to get into the same guy I'm choosing. So I'll just let you get into it, Ari. Do you have any season awards?
Yeah.
Look at that. That's the only one I see. And I was the same thinking.
Yeah, just one season-long award for me. And we're going to keep the Mariners talk going on here with Julio. Like you said, Ohtani being out of the AL makes it wide open, this race. Right now, Julio's tied with Corey Seager for the 4th shortest odds, and it's behind Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and Yordan Alvarez. And when you look at, the 4 lineups, excuse me, of the 4 guys in that the 5 guys kind of in that top 4, when you include Julio and Seager, who are tied for 4th shortest. The 3 other lineups that are in that conversation are a lot deeper. I mean, you have the Yankees, obviously, with Judge and Soto at the top, the Astros with Yordan at the 3rd shortest at plus 800, and then the Rangers with Corey Seager, who's tied with Julio at plus 1,000. So I think in part you could make the argument that you have other guys taking away from Judge, Soto, from taking away from each other, obviously. And with Yordan, you could have, Bregman, Tucker, Altuve taking away from Yordan in some sense. And then with Corey Seager, with, Simeon, Lowe, other guys in the range lineup taking away from Seager. So Julio's, in the weakest lineup, top to bottom, out of all these guys. So there's that. Julio, I think, if Julio helps lead the Mariners to the playoffs, I think that's the most impressive, out of all those guys, in that top 5. And then, I think the big thing with Julio has been slow starts. And I talked about with the Mariners over a win total, how they need to avoid a slow start. And that is mostly on the back of Julio starting fast and not starting to throw himself. So those two kind of correlate in a way. So yeah, this is just again a value plus 1,000 for Julio. Again, the weakest lineup with a lot more weight to carry than any other guy, in the top five. And Judge, Soto, Jordan, and Seager, a lot more kind of weight to carry in his respective lineup. I think that can go a long way if he can help lead the Mariners to the back to the playoffs, and potentially, I mean, if they can win the division, I think he could be a near lock to win MVP, assuming he is obviously a big part of that reason. Which there's no reason why he wouldn't be.
I feel like there's just so much value for Julio Rodriguez to win the MVP because of all the things you said. The fact that it's a weaker lineup, but they kind of is to his value here because he kind of has to carry the team essentially, and is the focal point for that. And I feel like there's a great value for the MVP. At plus 1,000. Like you said, there's guys, Jordan and Juan Soto, Aaron Judge and Corey Seager, and there's those guys. But when you look at all those teams, like the Angels have one of the best 1 through 7s, and Rangers coming off a World Series win, and then the Yankees, the best 2 in baseball with Juan and Judge. Those lineups are already so stacked in itself. Didn't really have any opportunity, for one kind of be the main focus of their team. And that's what Julio Rodriguez kind of is with the Seattle Mariners team. He is the main focus. He is the guy. He's the franchise. And I think there's great value for him at plus 1,000 for him to win MVP, especially as you mentioned in a wide open race where he finished, I believe he finished top 5 last year, if I'm not mistaken, or top 10 in voting with Shohei Ohtani. So obviously there's great value. And obviously you mentioned the one kind of caveat is the fact that he does kind of start slow, but maybe with this, maybe the whole new attitude change that he's had this off season, some of the Mariner fans like us have seen it on Twitter. He's definitely, whether it's just him being spotlighted everywhere by almost every Twitter account or every Instagram account, or just him with his mentality change. It's just things are already lining up for Julio Rodriguez MVP season, whether it's this year, next year, or sometime soon. But it's coming. It is coming, but we hope it is this year, obviously. So I like the value of plus 1,000 for you as well. And I know it's been a long episode, but we're going to finally wrap it up here. We're going to switch over from just DraftKings stuff to Prize Picks, and we're taking some season-long entries here. I'm my personal one that I will be sharing with you guys sometime soon as I start to build it. But I'm going to start building it with these two props right here. First, I'm going to take Emmanuel Clase, and I'm taking his over 38 saves. This was something I got here. I think his total number was at 36. He finished with 40. Now, you're thinking, okay, Korea, the total went up by 2. Why are you taking it again? Here's why. The Cleveland Guardians led the league last year in the most saves with 12. That means Clase had more opportunities to win games, but obviously, whether it's the defense behind them or the guys at the plate, things didn't go right. And Clase, like as I said earlier, is kind of the big reason as to why the Guardians, kind of go with you, who have a great chance to win this AL Essential, because he's the hard-hitting reliever who is very consistent, some of the nastiest stuff. He's a top 5 reliever in baseball. Let's be real here. Emmanuel Clase is one of the best relievers in baseball, and he is a big reason as to why this Guardians team won so many games last year. And even though they missed the playoffs, he's still 41 saves. And I think that's incredible. Someone who they depend on so much in those situations. Now, obviously, this is a very team-dependent year for saves, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But in terms of the stats here, look, he finished with 41 last year. They still led the league with about 12 to 13 blown saves last year, or opportunities to get the save. And whether it was Clase or some other pitcher who was in that position, they still blew it. And Clase still finished with 41. And so that's a great number for him to finish over 38 and a half. 41 last year, and I think he's going to have more opportunities this year to do it. So I'm going to just run it back with Emmanuel over saves. I love it. He is kind of the big focal point. I don't know what his F4 is in terms of, being on the Guardians, but I'm pretty high, somewhere up there. Just because of how much he contributes to this team. So I'm taking Emmanuel Clase over 38.5. So love that number for him. He, like I said, last year he got it at 41. Last year his was at 36.5. He got 41. And obviously, as I said earlier, they had more opportunities for some more saves or whatnot, and they led the league in most blown games. So I think that's a kind of coinciding reason as to why I would Emmanuel Clase over 38.5 saves. And then go to pretty much one of the more popular in terms of whole season. I'm still debating. I want to take this one, but I love just the idea and the value. I'm taking Freddie Freeman over 95.5 ribbies here. And the reason is because you look at this lineup and you think, oh my God, how is there not an opportunity for Freddie Freeman to just rack up ribbies? I mean, we know the lineup, but bets. Shohei Ohtani, Teoscar Hernandez, Freddie Freeman, James Outman. Shall I go on and go on? Or should I tell you about all the guys that are going to get on base? Freddie Freeman's just going to hit them in. This is something that, Freeman, I believe he was a 100 RBI guy last year. And I think this is setting it up for summer. I was going to target Shohei Ohtani, but the books have kind of already adjusted to him, already just having solo hitting year only. So obviously his numbers are going to be a little more inflated than previous years because it's just solely focusing on hitting the ball this year, not worrying about having to have a decent ERA or whatnot, obviously with him not pitching this year. But at the same time, I do believe, even with those numbers, I think there's some good value on Ohtani. So it's going to be Freeman or Ohtani for me, but I just love the idea of just kind of hitting all those guys in, one of the best lineups in baseball for a reason. And, this is they are the regular season champs. The Dodgers are always going to be, that team in the regular season dominates just like your Braves, your New York Yankees, all those who just kind of dominate in the regular season, fail in the postseason. I like to target them for these kind of seasons. So whether it's going to be Freeman, I love the RBIs here for either one, but I'm leaning Freeman just because he is more of a tact, hitter. Even though obviously Shohei Ohtani, he can hit the ball wherever, how hard, whatnot. But in terms of just driving runs in, there's a great opportunity for Freddie Freeman, to just really get over 100 RBIs this just with all the talent that the Angeles Dodgers have in that whole lineup. So those are my favorite squares right now. I'm going to have a lot more, obviously, as we get a little bit closer to the season. And obviously, with the Dodgers and Padres starting in about a week, I'm going to make a decision on what I'm sticking with Freeman or even not even EC. But I love Clase. That's the one I'm definitely going to start my season long in terms of my prize picks. So Emmanuel Clase over 38.5 saves. I'm loving it. I think it's a great value. It only went up 2. And yes, it's a team-dependent stat, but at the same time, he had 41 last year in a down year for the Guards when he also when the team also blew many opportunities for him to get more. So that's a great square if you want to start there. And I also like Freddie Freeman over 9.5 ribbies. Like I said, just one of the key reasons as to why this is one of the best teams offense. You have a consistent left who can pull the ball away, gets on base, drives in. That's what I love about this. So give me Freddie Freeman over 95.5 ribbies. If it's going to be that or Ohtani, and then Clase over 38.5 save. Those are my season entry squares. Ari, do you have season entry squares that you've been looking at on Prize Picks so far?
Yeah, just one for me so far. CJ Abrams stolen bases. He's probably the biggest or one of the bigger pieces of the Juan Soto trade that sent him, and that sent him to the Padres. In his first full season last year, he had 47 stolen bases, and I think he can potentially improve even more in terms of getting on base more consistently. He hit 245, which I think that can take a step forward this year, a slight step forward at least. This is pretty much as simple as him already exploding past this line last year and him, still being so young and still improving as a hitter at the plate and still, just getting on base even more as well this year. So pretty simple. Abrams over 36.5 stolen bases. He exploded past this line last year, and that was his first full season again in the MLB. And I think he's going to improve as a hitter, as he gains another year of experience and can get on base more. So just going with Abrams over stolen bases to get at least 37 stolen bases this year.
I think that's a good look for you. You mentioned CJ Abrams being a big part of that. It's so funny to say the first Juan Soto trade that sent him to San Diego. Obviously, CJ Abrams was kind of the big package in that deal that sent him from San Diego to Washington. And obviously, you mentioned he had 37 last year. I think he's one of those guys. In baseball, it's kind of him and Esteury Ruiz that kind of lead. In terms of speed, the speed between the bats, in terms of bats, those two kind of, I think, led each effectively in stolen bases last year. But I expect another big J Abrams as well. You mentioned, I like him more on the bat side, but that kind of coincides, with him on base as well. If his bat is going to be a lot more productive, I kind of like him on base being a lot more productive as well in terms of his stolen bases. So I like that prop as well for him being over 36.5 stolen bases. You mentioned he had 47 last year, and then I feel like he's going to have a lot use with this Washington Nationals team that is obviously not in any direction to be competing for playoff or pennant races, but obviously they're gonna develop the talent that they have to try to be a team that is going to be competing in the next 3 to 5 years. And the big centerpiece for that is CJ Abrams. So obviously, seeing him kind of be the main star, for this Washington national team is going to be huge. So I do like that over 36.5 stolen out for you. So finally, we got through it all. I know it's been a long video. There's so much for tuning in all the way to the end. We wanted to do this because we love baseball so much. And, like I said, we're getting around the corner. Obviously, the season starts in about a week, the Dodgers and the Padres. But for the rest of the MLB teams, starting at about the end of the month, we just make sure that we have some video locked down for our full season preview. Because obviously, March Madness is a week away. And, obviously we didn't want to get lost in all the March Madness, lore alongside the MLB season. So we wanted to make sure that we got early out for you. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to this Mayo. You can find this video posted on our YouTube at AKP Sports Talk. Also on our Twitter, we will have posted AKP Sports Talk. We're going to be posting this video over and over on Twitter, and we're going to be, sharing more as we get closer to the MLB season. But obviously, we're not going to have we may full card today, obviously, just of college basketball or whatnot. Obviously, we've been doing some MLB diving. So, but that's going to do it for this episode. We back tomorrow, obviously, with some college basketball. But after tomorrow, it's going to be our episode of the week. Ari will be traveling for a little bit, so we will be back after the bracket is the next time after Thursday. You're going to see us, Ari. We're going to have a March Madness bracket. Isn't that exciting? So exciting, man. I'm hyped. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's Ari. I'm Korea. We will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the 2024 MLB season preview. See you guys tomorrow.